Hi, Annie and Luli. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. And making my face bigger. Wait, excuse me. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about living things, about animal and animal-like protists. And I'm gonna explain more about protists in a moment. But one thing that you have to remember is that the cells of animals have a similar general structure. Okay, all animal cells are eukaryote cells, meaning that they have three parts: the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nucleus, three parts, okay? But animal cells have many variations between them. They have a difference in size, in shape, and structure. And that determines if the cell is going to be part of a muscle, or blood, or bone, or other tissue in the body of the animal. The animal cells are joined together to make a specific organism that is a part of a species of animals. And all species have to survive through reproduction. We can divide animals into big groups. They are either vertebrates, meaning that they have a backbone, or they are invertebrates, meaning that they have no backbone. And God has made a great variety of animals here on earth. For cells, the cells of animals don't have to be rigid or hard like the cells of plants and fungi. Animal cells don't need cell walls. They have a cell membrane. Animals don't undergo photosynthesis, so they don't need chloroplast, they don't need chlorophyll within their cells. Animal cells can be different sizes and shapes depending on their function, meaning what do they do in the body. Blood cells must be round and they have to be able to move. They have to be unattached to move through the body system. Epithelial cells, the ones that form like skin or skin-like tissue, needs to be long and thin to cover the body surface. All of these cells are joined together to form tissues and to form the animal's body. And then animal cells function in a similar way than plant and fungi cells. They take in food and store it. They use this food for survival. Animal cells use oxygen and then give off carbon dioxide. In plants, it's just the opposite because photosynthesis takes in carbon dioxide and produces oxygen. So the other way around. Okay, for cells, animals have different tissues that include epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous tissues. Here I put an example of different tissues or different groups of cells that humans have. In each of these tissues, the cells are similar and are grouped to perform a similar body function. Muscles tissues help move the body. Nervous tissue carries messages. And then connective tissue joins and supports all of the body cells. And epithelial tissue or cells cover the body and protect it. Linings within the body are also made of epithelial cells. For example, that's a type of tissue that covers organs to protect them, okay? As I said before, animals can be classified as invertebrates or vertebrates. Some protists are not animals, but they have animal-like qualities because they can move from place to place and they take in oxygen and give carbon dioxide. So some people, when talking about animals, we talk about protists too. All of these living organisms, animals and animal-like protists, have to go through a life cycle that involves birth, reproduction, and death. Okay, now we're gonna talk about protozoans. Protozoans are a type of animal-like protists. Okay, so protozoans are protists, that's their kingdom. They eat their food through the cell membrane. They get rid of their waste the same way, through the cell membrane. So the cell membrane, it's like this cover that it's around the cell and it lets in food and then lets out waste. Through a process called osmosis, oxygen passes into the cell of the protozoan and carbon dioxide is released from the cell. And then reproduction in most protozoans occurs through mitosis. We have talked about mitosis a lot this year, but remember that the cells divide and then form new cells. Other protozoans reproduce through budding or forming spores. And then other protozoans shows the beginning of sexual reproduction, requiring a male and a female parents, like what, for example, what happens with humans. Okay, let me go to the next one. Then we're going to talk about invertebrate animals, okay? Invertebrate animals can be classified as insects, as worms, or mollusks. They don't have a backbone. All invertebrates are egg layers. They lay eggs. But they have different body structure or stages in their life cycle. The beginning of an insect reproduction occurs when the female forms eggs in her ovary. Sperm from a male is deposited. Sorry, here's a mistake, but I'm gonna fix it real quick. Okay, so sperm from the male is deposited inside the body of the female. When the female lays her eggs, the sperm fertilizes them, and after hatching, the new insects undergo a growth stage. A few types of insects grow into adults when a tiny copy of the parent is hatched, like the silverfish. So they're just like the parent, but in a small version. And then other insects go through a nymph form before becoming adults, like what happens with the cricket that we learned about before. And then some insects are hatched into larvae, then change into pupae, and finally become adults, like what happens with the housefly or the butterfly. And then we have another type of invertebrates called worms. Worms come in many varieties. The most common ones that we know is the earthworm, but there are different types of worms like tapeworms, flatworms, roundworms, leeches. Worm eggs are fertilized inside the female body, and then the eggs are released before they're hatched. Many baby worms are copies of their parents. Some worm species, like the tapeworm, like the one we learned about cats, that it's a parasite, they hatch into larvae, so they need a host, like a cat, in order to survive. And in that stage, they are called parasites. Later, they can become adult tapeworms. And then we have mollusks. Mollusks are soft-bodied invertebrates that have bones or a shell. They grow a hard shell to protect themselves. And we have some examples. Snails, for example, clams, oysters. Some mollusks don't have a hard outer shell. For example, the squid or the octopus, okay? Some mollusk eggs are fertilized inside the female's bodies. Other mollusk species lay their eggs before fertilization. The eggs are in small cases when they are laid. Then larvae are hatched. Some mollusk larvae come out of the cases and must find a plant or an animal host until they reach adulthood. Other mollusk larvae remain in the cases and come out as young adults. Most mollusks grow their main shells during the adult stage. And then we have vertebrates. Vertebrates are animals that have a backbone, and that backbones give them form, shape to their body, okay? And protects their internal organs. All vertebrates are multicellular, means that they have more than one cell in their body. And they have different shapes and sizes. What are the types of vertebrates? There are fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, and birds are leg eggs, but mammals don't lay eggs. Mammals are vertebrates that are live-bearing, meaning that they give birth to alive babies, like what happens with humans or with dogs or cats. Okay, so for the first type of vertebrates, we have fish. Fish are vertebrates that live in the water, and they use gills to breathe, right? Remember that thing that they had in their necks? Most fish are egg layers. Their eggs are laid by females and then fertilized by the sperm of males. After fertilization, they abandon the eggs. They are not really good parents. The eggs hatch into tiny copies of the parents, and then few of the fish that are born survive until adulthood and reproduce. Many die because they serve as food for a bigger fish. And several fish species are live-bearing, but most of them are egg-laying, okay? The parents don't care for the offspring, as I said before. Then we have amphibians. Amphibians live part of their life in the water, like fish, but then they change and live part of their lives on land. That's called metamorphosis, okay? An example of amphibians are frogs. Their eggs are laid and fertilized in the water. When the eggs hatch, the baby looks more like a fish than their parents, and they can't survive out of water. But soon they start changing. They grow lungs and legs, and their tails disappears. And now the offspring starts to appear more like their parents. Then they can't live underwater without coming to the surface for air to breathe. Then we have reptiles. Examples of reptiles are alligators, lizards, snakes, turtles. They're vertebrates that are covered with scales or plates for protection. They don't lay eggs in the water, they lay eggs on the land. And they don't protect their eggs, just abandon them. They usually live near water, but can't breathe underwater. They don't have gills, they have lungs. And newborn baby reptiles look like their parents, but their scales are soft. They're not hard yet. And then we have birds. Birds are the only animals that have feathers. They all have wings, and almost all of them can fly, except some exceptions, like, for example, the penguin or the ostrich. They have 2 legs. Their eggs are fertilized when still inside the female's bodies. The shell of the fertilized eggs become hardened before the female lays them. Parents need to keep the eggs warm and moist before hatching. And the newborn birds are helpless, and they have to be fed and protected by the parents. But when they have grown, they look more like the parents, and then the parents push them out of the nest, and they have to learn to survive on their own. And then the last category, we have mammals. Humans are mammals, yeah. Mammals are a very important group of vertebrates. They differ from almost all other animals in several important ways. They nurse their babies with milk, and only mammals have hair or fur. Mammals can be different sizes, shapes, and they can have different lifestyles. Mammal embryos develop inside the female's body, like a baby inside the mom's belly, okay? The gestation period of embryo development varies among mammals. So the baby can be inside the mother's body different times, like a couple of months, or like humans, 9 months, or longer, like elephants, I think 10 or 11 months. Baby mammals are very weak at birth, and they need the care, protection, and training of their parents. Okay, girls, that would be it for today.